The first roster news of this 2026 49ers season, and training camp is here. So I'll be the first to key you in. Look at the color of that water here in Shaver Lake. This is where I recharge before John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan open up 49ers training camp tomorrow. We're going to learn about Nick Bosa, likely to the physically unable to perform list to begin camp. He might have a chance to be off of it, though, and if he's not on it, then that's excellent news for the 49ers. I fully expect Mykel Williams, who tore his ACL a good 6 weeks after Nick Bosa, to be on that PUP list, and I also expect George Kittle, who tore his Achilles in the playoffs against the Eagles, to be on PUP for the 49ers. We will see with Isaac Guerendo, who suffered the torn pectoral muscle over the course of this offseason lifting weights. The 49ers might have Guerendo fully healed and off of any injury list, but if there is any question, they're going to put him on the PUP list, and that is going to mean that he cannot practice until they remove him from the PUP list. Now, anybody who is placed on the physically unable to perform list can be removed from it at any time over the course of training camp. They still count against the 90-man roster, but it leaves optionality in case they're still on the PUP list when there's a 53-man cut down, because that's the only way they can be transferred over to the PUP list in the regular season, which means they don't take up a roster spot. So 49ers, I don't think, plan on any of these players who are going to be officially placed on PUP to remain there for the regular season, but they will maintain the optionality, and the good news is they can remove them from PUP at any point during training camp. The off-season recharge has finished. I joined KNBR. We talked about a ton of 49ers stuff to set up this training camp. First practice is going to be on Sunday. We started with the cornerback position and moved to the receivers and everywhere else on this roster. So enjoy the appearance on KNBR. Pizza grilling season, lake season coming to a close. Off to the Bay Area for the start of what should be another great 49ers journey.
And I know David Lombardi of the San Francisco Standard is right there with us. He joins us on the UMA guest line. David, I know it's been a big offseason for you between being a father and still getting the YouTube channel going, making sure the content's set for the season. So we appreciate your time, and it's good to reconnect. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing well as well. Excited for the season to get going, and as long as you just got the Sun Hat game ready to go. I know Matt Mayoko and Larry Krueger were fighting about that last week, so just make sure you got the sun protection, and otherwise we are all good. The internet is something that dominates the NFL offseason or the NFL in season, and videos of George Kittle in his rehab process have been something that are getting fans excited. What's your pulse on Kittle and his return timetable? Do you think there's a real shot he could be good to go by week 1 in Australia?
Well, he's been doing the stem cell stuff, too. He posted about that from Panama, which might help accelerate this recovery. I know that the recovery timetables aren't the same that they were even 5 years ago, and especially for a player of Kittle's caliber, you look at him and you say, that this guy can potentially be back sooner. Now, the question, I think, is going to come down to whether or not the 49ers want to risk putting him on a 15-hour flight to Australia, because as we know, those are not good for muscle injury recovery, anything. So I think that he is well ahead of schedule. That has essentially been confirmed. I think he's doing everything he possibly can, but I would expect him to start on the PUP list to begin training camp, and they can activate him at any time, and maybe they do activate him, but I think it's an entirely separate question regarding whether or not they put him on that flight to Melbourne.
David, that's obviously one of the big storylines. I think Australia will be a big one. How do the 49ers prepare for that? Is training camp going to be different, and in what ways? And, of course, can Kittle come back, and at what point? What are some of the other things as they get going officially on Sunday with that first practice that you're going to be looking at as key questions throughout the month of August?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what Raheem Morris wants to run and who his guys are. We probably won't have an answer on the schematic front until the regular season actually begins. I'm sure the 49ers don't want to telegraph all too much of that ahead of time, and they won't allow us to report on specific scheme stuff from training camp. So the public probably won't know that until September or so once they do play the Rams. But, something's really interesting to me. We look at a cornerback like Jack Jones, free agent, whom the 49ers added. I was just talking about this on Twitter a little bit earlier this morning. He was one of the best zone coverage corners in the league last year. He was very productive in zone coverage, but he also was one of the worst man coverage corners in the league last year. So, if he is going to challenge for some playing time, and you would think that he would challenge Renardo Green at outside cornerback for playing time, if that's going to be a battle, and he's going to either have to be a much better man coverage cornerback, or maybe the 49ers are going to be running a whole heck of a lot of zone under Raheem Morris. I don't know. One of those two things I think would have to happen for somebody like Jack Jones to push for a lot of playing time. So that's the kind of stuff, or that's the lens through which I'm going to be watching training camp, because they have added veterans at several positions. We've talked so much about the offense and wide receiver, but on defense, the 49ers have stocked up in terms of cornerback depth that could push for real playing time. They also added Nate Hobbs, who had been on a big contract with the Green Bay Packers, and he's probably a better inside cornerback than an outside cornerback, and maybe he can even filter into that slot cornerback mix, and maybe Upton Stout with Raheem Morris, the new defensive coordinator, can see some time at safety. I'm excited to see how this 49ers defense evolves in terms of adaptability under a new defensive coordinator who has coached several different teams and schemes over the time in the NFL. So I think that he can bring some variance to what the 49ers are running.
What is your sense, David, as to just where the 49ers are at with Renardo Green specifically, and the potential of him maybe falling out of favor over the course of last year?
The cornerback was not the issue for the defense last year. I think he was okay last year. I don't think he was as good as he was his rookie year. I think that it was a little bit of a sophomore slump. But if you look at the problems of the defense last year, corner was at the very bottom of the list. They didn't have a pass rush. They only had 20 sacks, fewest in the league, because Bosa got hurt and Mykel Williams got hurt, and they didn't have the defensive tackle pass rush really to begin with. Yetur Gross-Matos was supposed to give them a little bit of juice there, but he also was injured for most of the season. B, they weren't good on the second level because Fred Warner got hurt in week 6. And C, I thought safety was an issue last year. Now, it might have been an issue primarily because they didn't have a pass rush in front of it. But, all the way at the very bottom of the list was the cornerback issue. And I think a lot of people point toward it because of Kyle Shanahan chewing Renardo Green out on the sideline during that game against Seattle. But he could have yelled at any number of players during that game. The bottom line is that they just didn't have the troops in that game. I mean, they just too many injuries, and they're playing one of the great defenses of all time. On the other side, so they got killed by Seattle in the playoffs. But I think that Renardo will obviously begins as cornerback too. But somebody like Jack Jones has started games in the NFL before, and the goal is to create as competitive of a camp as you can. And again, if Jack Jones can show more proficiency in man coverage, he can theoretically challenge Renardo Green for that job, and that's a good thing for the 49ers. I just think that Renardo's obviously the favorite to hold on to that cornerback position.
Talking to David Lombardi of the SF Standard on the UMA guest line, getting you ready for 49er football training camp starting this Sunday with the first practice. So we were talking about pressure to perform in terms of being available, but knowing what someone could do, versus pressure to perform in terms of leveling up their game or bouncing back from a down year. The secondary fit more of the latter, which is, these are guys that are fighting for their jobs or maybe another contract, and young safeties. De'Amado Lenoir had a lot on his plate last year. You just talked about Renardo Green. With Raheem Morris coming over and taking the place of Robert Saleh as one of the big offseason losses, losing Saleh, is the secondary the unit you're going to be most fixated on to watch in terms of just how Raheem can get the best out of these guys? And, I mean, you mentioned it. He's done a lot of diversion with his scheme, so we don't know exactly how that's going to work until we see the tape. But is that the unit that you say you got the most eyeballs on?
No, I would say the whole defense, because even with the fronts, that they've already shown some hints that there's going to be some more 3-4 stuff that they run this year. They're talking a lot about Romello Height, the second-round pick, as a weapon who they can either drop into coverage or rush from the edge, which is obviously his natural position, or even line up against guards in some instances. And this is a lighter, fast edge rusher, and I think that when you look at the fronts that Raheem Morris has coached and the variation that he's coached over his career, this is a good weapon to be able to employ in whatever Raheem Morris wants to run, whether it be five-man front or anything else. So I think that there's going to be variation in the secondary, and I think Raheem Morris, starting his coaching career as a DB guy, he was the assistant DB coach in Tampa when John Lynch was a player there. So I think Mike Tomlin was the head DB coach. So there's some cool history there from a few decades ago. Raheem played safety at Hofstra in college. I think that that's probably the position that people naturally wonder about regarding, his background as a coordinator. But I think that the entire defense could throw some interesting wrinkles out there. And I'm excited to see it because they have added a lot of young, adaptable talent over the past 2 years. The defense was the oldest in the league in 2024, and they said enough with that. This defense is not good against the run. We need a younger, faster, hungrier defense, and they have really stuck to that plan over the past two off seasons, and they've gotten a whole lot younger. They're one of the youngest defenses in the NFL now, and they've got a defensive coordinator like Raheem Morris, who I think is looking at a lot of moldable clay.
David, switching gears to the offensive side of the ball, De'Zhaun Stribling, how do you think they're going to look to use him? And do you think that he's somebody that's going to have the potential to be a factor, by week one? He's obviously going to have to earn it. We know all young wide receivers have to do that with Kyle Shanahan, but do you think he's equipped to be able to be a factor come game one against the Rams?
So that's the hope and a common theme through a lot of this 49ers draft class. The guy who I just talked about, Romello Hyde, played for 6 different colleges in 6 years, which meant that he had to learn 6 different playbooks. So De'Zhaun Stribling played for 3 different schools, right? He played at Washington State, he played at Oklahoma State, and then he played at Ole Miss. And all 3 of those offenses asked him to do different things. So if you watch a lot of the Ole Miss tape, he's either running screen passes and then taking it to the house because he's fast. He's got 4.36 speed, or he's running some of the go balls. He doesn't do a whole lot of intermediate stuff at Ole Miss, but at Oklahoma State, if you put on that tape, he is wearing out the middle of the field. He's more of a position intermediate guy who obviously has the speed to turn on the jets and pick up some yards after the catch. So I say all this to imply that the guy has already shown that he could pick up new playbooks. He's already shown that he could be adaptable type of weapon, and those are exactly the type of characteristics that you're looking for when you need a player to pick up the NFL quickly, when you need a player to be able to, you're drinking from a fire hose early on in the NFL. Everybody is drinking from a fire hose, but how quickly you can adapt to it, I think, is very, very correlated to what you've already shown that you could handle. And since these guys, and you're seeing a lot of it in college football now because of NIL, they're staying in college for longer, B, they're switching teams very often, and C, these colleges are trying to model themselves after NFL teams and NFL offenses. Well, because of all these things, I think you're seeing more ready-made talent, and the 49ers made it a point to go after ready-made talent over the course of this offseason. And just from an analytical perspective, when you talk about contracts and salary cap efficiency, the first 4 years of a player's career, when you draft them, they come at a very affordable rate because the rookie wage scale determines the contract. These guys can't negotiate their contracts. So you think, if it takes a guy 3 or 4 years to develop, you miss almost all of that window where he's coming to you for cheap. But the 49ers have a bunch of players, and I think De'Zhaun Stribling is one of them. They think that they can get in there right away and get very, very efficient production, given the fact that his salary cap hit is only going to be a couple $1 million this year. And I think, to more specifically answer your question, they initially hope that he's going to fit in that Jawan Jennings role, the big slot role. But I think that they see potential long-term upside as an X wide receiver, which is where Mike Evans is going to be. But we know that Evans is 33, and who knows how long he's going to continue playing. So maybe eventually De'Zhaun Stribling becomes the 49ers' X wide receiver.
David Lombardi with us on the UMA guest line. I was reading Eric Branch in the Chronicle yesterday, and he talked about the advice that they gave the 49ers going into the offseason and then revisiting it. And he's like, hey, largely they listened to us, because everyone in the media, as in us, we all know the most and are the best people to listen to. But what would you say, David, to the boisterous offensive line crowd that they didn't do much to address it? They did get the Trent Williams contract done and restructured. And now on top of that, you look at the way their season ended in Seattle. Oh, and Myles Garrett's a Ram, and we're looking at another NFC West foe.
Well, the objective look at the tape and the data shows that the offensive line was not the big 49ers problem. Just like, people will say, oh, well, the secondary, the cornerbacks, because they saw Shanahan yelling at Renardo Green, that wasn't really the top issue. If you have to look at everything in perspective of the rest of the league. And I think that there are probably 28 or 29 fan bases that complain about their offensive line on a season in, season out basis. So why is that? Well, it's because in general, defensive line athleticism has outpaced what we're seeing on the O-line. So in general, if you're in drop back situations all the time, your O-linemen are going to get beat, and you're going to think that your O-linemen aren't any good. But again, almost all of the rest of the league is saying the same thing, right? So to the fans who are only looking at their one team think that their offensive line is terrible. It's just the nature of football. You have to run the ball effectively to take the steam out of opposing pass rushes so that you're playing the game downhill so that your offensive linemen aren't left out on a hopeless island. So, you look at the 49ers offensive line from last year, and you also look at the fact that Brock Purdy was the best quarterback in terms of avoiding sacks in the entire league last year. That's a superpower that you have at the QB position that you can definitely ride to great offensive success. And when Purdy was available last year, despite the fact that the 49ers did not have a fully stocked cupboard, anything close to that at wide receiver, their receiver numbers were bad last year in terms of separation and in terms of availability. They were still a top 5 offense. So, the rushing success or the lack of it last year didn't come from big time struggles with the offensive line. It came because they couldn't notch explosive runs, and that mainly came because the receivers weren't blocking well on the perimeter. So if you actually break down what went wrong for the 49ers last season, and it was still the number 6 offense in all football, so it wasn't a terrible offense. But if you look at what limited them from being a top 1, top 2 offense, it was the perimeter. It wasn't the offensive line. So, I think it's just really important to acknowledge reality. I think it's become trendy online to just scream about the offensive line over and over again, but it's not really what the main issue for the 49ers was in 2025.
That being said, David, how do you see the left guard position shaking out? Because we know Trent Williams is obviously still here, and Brendel's here, and Pooney and McKivitz, but left guard is the spot where there is a competition here. So how do you see that shaken out between Connor Colby or Carver Willis or others?
Yeah, so I think that left guard and center are the two positions that you have to figure out, not just on the short-term basis. Left guard, obviously, you got to figure out right now. But center, Jake Brendel's entering the final year of his contract. They restructured Jake's contract. They did not give him an extension. He's going to be 34 years old. So obviously, the 49ers, that's such an important position. You've got to figure that out. I thought Jake was better last year than he was in 2024 because he was really dealing with knee tendonitis in 2024. So I think that was actually a step in the right direction, but they still need to have a future plan. And I really do believe that Carver Willis is high up on the 49ers list of prospective centers for the future. That's the draft pick in the 4th round out of the University of Washington. They've already started working him at center last year at Washington, working under head coach Jed Fish, who is somebody who's very close with Chris Furster. They're best friends, offensive line coach of the 49ers. On that Washington team, Carver Willis was already snapping the ball late in practices because the idea was that at the NFL level, he probably would have to have some center adaptability, and he's really, really smart to be able to play that position. So maybe that's the 49ers' longer-term answer at center. We'll see how he develops this year. In the shorter term, though, that left guard position that you mentioned, Robert Jones comes from more of a power blocking background, and you need to have a big, strong left guard. You can't finesse the left guard position. That's just you're facing the three techniques in this league are just freaks, right? You've got a lot of strength. You've got a lot of war daddies at that position that you've got to take on. So you look at somebody like Robert Jones. The 49ers believe that he's past the neck issue that kept him out last season. I would say that he's the favorite to start at left guard, but Connor Colby, they've been happy with his progress over the course of this offseason. Second-year man's going to have every opportunity to make his case over the course of training camp, and we'll see how that goes. He struggled last year, but it was his rookie year, and like I said earlier, he was drinking out of a fire hose like rookies typically do. So we'll see how Connor Colby looks in training camp this season, but I would put Robert Jones as the leader in the clubhouse at left guard.
David, do you think a Deebo Samuel reunion is something that makes sense for the 49ers, or at this point is it better for them to try to just get a good look at Watkins and Cowing?
I think the Deebo Samuel would make sense as a gadget weapon for the 49ers and not as the role that he had the last time that he was with San Francisco. So what does that mean? Well, if you're a gadget weapon, then you got to think about players like Sky Moore and Ray McLeod. Those are guys who have to play a lot of special teams and who come at a price tag of no more than $2 million. Deebo Samuel willing to play for less than $2 million and be a gadget weapon for the 49ers? Probably not. I think that he could probably wait this out. He might even be like Kendrick Bourne last year and wait till week 2 to sign with the team and find where a good fit is. I think that he's probably still worth more than that. And the 49ers, I think, you could always use Deebo. That would be one hell of a gadget weapon to have on your offense, and they would gladly welcome him in. Maybe they would even stretch the budget a little bit past the $2 million, but I believe that Deebo thinks that somebody will offer more, a need will arise, and he's probably going to be right in that assumption. But, I mean, if it all worked out, the 49ers would welcome him back, and you could always use a player with that unique skill set.
Yeah, it's kind of what we flushed out ourselves shortly before this segment. My last one for you. You're a Taqueria Cancun guy, right? That's your spot, if I remember properly?
Yeah, that's the spot. Taqueria Cancun.
Awesome.
19th and Mission.
Yeah, I just went there for the first time in a while last weekend, and I was like, I got to go here more often. So, yeah, in addition to reading you. For this one, I went chicken quesadilla because it was a long day of beverages, and so I went heavy. But typically, I go steak burrito.
Well, their chicken at Taqueria Cancun is elite. Like, so some of these, I would say that different taquerias specialize in different protein. So for Al Pastor, for example, I'd do El Castillo over on Church and Market.
Yeah. And
then La Taqueria, the most famous one, they probably have the best steak, carne asada. So, but yeah, Cancun is they're very versatile, and you're not going to deal with the long lines that you do at La Taqueria. So it's a good hack. For some reason, it stayed under the radar, despite the fact that the reviews, it's kind of more of a local secret kind of place, but it's really, really good. I'm happy you went.
Oh, it was 100% worthwhile, and you hit the nail on the head with the line, too. Like, once Daniel Lurie talked about La Taqueria during Super Bowl week, I don't think it's ever been the same.
I've debated with him about, he's a La Taqueria guy. I told him, Taqueria Cancun, but I guess he's got to support everybody now in his job. But, I mean, part of being a San Franciscan is picking your favorite taqueria and then debating people about it and taking it way too personally. So that's my spot, Taqueria Cancun.
Look, if people are going to debate about everything and anything online when we're talking football, might as well do it about taquerias. I feel like it's all the same.
Nothing new.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
The burritos really, really inspire passion in people. I don't know what it is about the burrito, but I mean, they did that burrito bracket like 10 years ago on 538, and I think 3 of the 4 in the Final 4 were from the Mission in San Francisco. So it's definitely the best burrito city in the world, but picking your top one, that will never be settled fully.
No, not at all. So go get a Taqueria Cancun when you're back. Enjoy the rest of this offseason, although pretty much here and gone at this point. So we'll read you in the SF Standard, and I'll see you out there in Santa Clara soon.
All right, guys. Thank you. We'll see you there.